Hello everyone, and welcome to the 102 Hours YouTube channel. Tonight we slip beneath the looming canopy of Selma Woods, where the tangled branches loom overhead like skeletal fingers. Your flashlight beam quivers over mossy stumps and slick roots as a low mist coils around your ankles. You probably won't survive this, at least not without a story to tell. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, your boots sinking into damp earth while distant crickets chirp like scratchy records. Around you, the pines whisper secrets older than you can imagine. In 1888, the Jack the Ripper murders in London galvanized global fascination with unsolved crimes, and across the Atlantic a similar hunger for mystery took root here in these very woods. Back then, logging crews cleared trails but left behind rumors, a ghostly figure drifting through rings of fog, its form barely more than a silhouette. Historians still argue whether the first etched symbols were carved by wandering Civil War deserters or by settlers' imaginations run wild. Either way, those symbols, odd spirals and jagged lines, remain faintly visible on ancient bark if you know where to look. Your pulse flutters as you near a fallen cedar stripped of its bark, revealing pale wood carved with a strange lupin cross. Quirky local lore even claims the phantom in Selma Woods wears a tattered carnival mask, leaving the faint smell of caramel apples in its wake. You stop to inhale, earthy pine mingles with something unnervingly sweet. The breeze shifts, and for a heartbeat you swear you hear children's laughter echoing through the trees, an echo as out of place as a loon in a desert. In diaries from 1903, loggers described this same chuckle, crediting it to wayward spirits of wanderers long gone. With each step, your flashlight catches glimpses of uneven footprints pressed into mud. Some say these prints vanish at the edge of a cruel drop, others dismiss them as elk or bear. Skeptics point out how easy it is to misread tracks in low light. Yet when a sudden wind gust rustles the canopy, you glimpse a pair of glowing eyes reflected in damp undergrowth before they vanish, just like in the 1972 infrared footage that shocked nearby communities and went viral on early video-sharing networks. You press onward toward a cluster of charred stones where an old campsite once stood. Local historian journals note that in 1934, a prospector struck rich quartz, but left after 2 nights, claiming something watched him. His abandoned tent later yielded frost-cold patches that couldn't be explained by any known weather patterns. You remember that strange chill as you brush past scorched earth and lean closer, heart drumming. Every nerve in your body urges retreat, yet you're drawn deeper by curiosity that echoes a mainstream fascination. In 1841, Edgar Allan Poe's The Murders in the Rue Morgue introduced many to the detective story, and since then you've likely fed on tales of unknown terrors lurking just out of sight. Here in Selma Woods, that tradition lives on, only more raw, more immediate. You feel the air thicken, the forest holding its breath as though aware of your every move. A distant owl hoots, and you pause. The silence that follows feels like a held exhale, as if the forest itself is listening. Somewhere behind you, a twig snaps. You swing your light around in a whirl of panic, catching only shadows dancing between trunks. A heartbeat later, the hush returns, pressing in on you. You swallow hard, reminding yourself that many things go bump in the night: wolves, deer, the wind. Yet something within you whispers that this is different. Still, you move on, drawn by an irrepressible urge to unearth the story's origins. In a clearing ahead, moonlight spills onto a moss-covered slab, as if spotlighting the theater of an unseen drama. You squat to examine the moss, noticing it's been freshly disturbed, tiny particles of soil clinging to your fingertips. A sense of being watched prickles your skin. It's here, in this hushed green cathedral, that the legend first sprouted among solitary loggers, their tale creeping from campfire to tavern until it became the stuff of local myth. You rise, chest tight, and shine your beam up toward the silent treetops. Somewhere high above, a branch quivers, though no breeze stirs. Your breath hitches. Even now, over a century later, the phantom in Selma Woods refuses to reveal its true shape. And as you stand in the hush, heart pounding, you realize this is only the beginning. You step beyond the moss-rimmed clearing and feel the forest close in until each tree seems alive, leaning toward you. It was here, near a dusty logging track, that the earliest documented accounts of the phantom in Selma Woods emerged in the spring of 1942. Local hikers George Turner and his companion Evelyn Hayes filed nearly identical affidavits with the county sheriff, a tall, shadowy shape drifting silently between ancient pines at dusk, its form shifting like smoke. In April of that year, newspapers across 3 states reprinted these eerie testimonies, feeding an already ravenous fascination for unsolved enigmas, just a decade after the Lindbergh kidnapping gripped the nation and spurred intense public scrutiny of criminal mysteries. Of the two, Turner's account feels more tangible. He claimed to smell stale pipe tobacco on the breeze, oddly comforting against the damp earth. You might scoff, but the detail persisted in his letter to a regional magazine, and hikers decades later swear they catch that same scent at twilight. Mainstream historical records note that in 1932 the kidnapping of Charles Lindbergh's infant son led to the FBI expanding nationwide investigative protocols, making even remote tracts of forest fair game for federal attention. Historians still argue whether J. Edgar Hoover's bureau ever looked into Selma Woods sightings or dismissed them as folklore, but the sheriff's files remain curiously thin. Hayes's testimony, filed 6 weeks later, described a form so indistinct it blended with dappled moonlight. She wrote that the figure paused at the edge of their campfire ring, its outline blurred like a watercolor left in rain. You shiver, recalling the watercolor bleed on your camp map from last night's drizzle. Fringe rumor claims hikers once saw what looked like an old carnival mask drifting among the branches, tattered, painted with peeling reds and greens, earning the legend an alternate moniker, the Carousel Phantom. You wonder if these embellishments grew from genuine observation or collective imagination. By 1945, a troop of Boy Scouts camping near Pine Ridge reported hearing a childlike lullaby echo through the trees, notes rising and fading until silence swallowed them whole. Those same scouts never described seeing a figure, yet they felt watched, their tent flap quivering as though touched by invisible fingertips. Local scoutmasters later insisted the melody matched no known folk tune, though skeptics propose it could have been birdsong misconstrued in the dark. Historians still argue whether such auditory phenomena were mere hallucinations fueled by cabin fever, or if they point to something more. Ranger logs from 46 contain terse entries, odd lights between trees. Crew uneasy. No source found. A regional newspaper splashed these brief notes on page 3, sandwiched between war casualty lists and ration coupon notices, a testament to how ordinary life carried on under the shadow of global conflict. In those days, the world grappled with World War II horrors overseas, while here, you trace shell casings of intrigue among ferns and fern fronds. Even now, when you tread that same path, your skin prickles with the residual tension recorded in those logs. Curiously, some hikers claim to glimpse footsteps that hovered above the soil, as if the forest floor itself had rejected the footprint. They described prints that hovered mere inches above the ground before fading. Mainstream journals on cryptids note that similar levitating tracks appear in Alaskan Sasquatch lore, hinting at a possible cross-regional archetype. You pause, shining your light onto a patch of moss and half-formed depressions. Historians still argue whether these anomalies originated from wildlife or if they were staged by pranksters testing the limits of human credulity. As reports multiplied, the county fair carnival caravan rolled through Selma's outskirts in summer 1947, and with it came a rumor that the phantom delighted in following carnival music at night. Witnesses claimed that distant calliope tunes drifted on the breeze, luring them off trail. You tilt your head, imagining the tinkle of gongs beneath rustling leaves. Fringe accounts even describe discarded carnival tickets pinned to bark, though none survived to be examined. You catch yourself humming a distorted snippet of a calliope melody, out of tune and far too faint to be real. Under a harvest moon in October 48, a solitary hunter named Raymond Cole swore he saw the phantom pause at a creek crossing, robes dripping moisture as though wading through unseen waters. He claimed the figure's gaze felt like gravity pulling him forward, just before it dissipated into mist. His letter to a hunting lodge newsletter sparked debate among outdoorsmen, some decrying him as delusional, others swearing on their honor that they also felt drawn to that crossing, though none saw what he saw. Historians still argue whether Cole's vision was a byproduct of isolation or a genuine paranormal encounter. You push back a low branch and step onto a slope trodden by deer and doubt, where Turner and Hayes first froze in place. The same hush you felt in Section 1 returns, pregnant with expectation. You imagine them, two figures trembling under a skeletal canopy, armed only with wool coats and wild wonder. In that moment, they had no idea their words would echo through decades, shaping every whispered warning you hear now. You inhale the cold air, tasting iron and pine, feeling the forest playback their shock in every leaf rustle. Some argue that these early accounts were sensationalized by newspapers hungry for copy, much like tabloids stretching facts into fiction. Yet the consistency of details, the tobacco scent, the carnival whispers, the floating tracks, lends them an unsettling credibility. You slowly step over a gnarled root, mindful of the stories carved into these woods. The phantom's earliest recorded appearances might have blossomed into legend in the fertile mix of wartime anxiety and rural isolation. And as you move deeper into shadowed understory, you realize that this chapter of the saga has already woven itself into your psyche. Your heart hammers when you notice a glint of metal, perhaps an old cigarette lighter, half buried beneath pine needles. No brand, no markings, just a cold artifact of someone's brush with the unknown. You crouch to inspect it, imagining it once belonged to a hiker whose life changed forever. The forest around you holds its breath again. You hear nothing, see nothing, and yet you feel the weight of those first witnesses guiding your steps. Their echo lingers in the hush, and you can't help but wonder what they would say if they could watch you now. You step off the beaten path, your heart drumming as you approach the gaping mouth of the old Selma mine. Above you, a blood-red moon casts long, trembling shadows that dance along the rusted tracks. It was here, one frigid October night in 1962, that 23-year-old Lisa Carter vanished without a trace during her solo trek. In the months before her disappearance, she'd written in her journal about chasing legends, so you can almost picture her lantern swinging as she climbed the rocky incline. In 1937, aviator Amelia Earhart's own vanishing act over the Pacific Ocean captivated the world, and Lisa's disappearance tapped into that same collective fascination with unresolved mysteries and missing persons. You recall the faint scent of caramel apples from Section 1, drifting through the mist around mossy cedars, and you wonder if that same sweet tang lured Lisa closer to danger. Fringe whispermongers still claim that, on the night she went missing, a distant calliope played beneath the hillside, an impossible echo of carnival tunes that no living musician could produce. Historians still argue whether that tune was a product of optical illusion in foggy conditions or an imprint of some deeper, uncanny resonance within the woods. Your flashlight beam jitters over a slate-gray plaque embedded in the quartz-veined walls of the mine entrance. It's weathered so badly you can barely make out the embossed letters that once read Selma Claim Number 7. Peeling paint reveals dark veins of mineral stain, as if the rock itself had bled over decades. Locals say the mine was abandoned in 1910 after a cave-in killed 3 men. Their lanterns were never recovered, sparking tales of ghostly lights drifting down the shafts. You crouch low, scanning the ground, half buried beneath decaying leaves. You spot Lisa's compass, its needle spinning wildly whenever you raise your lantern. You crouch to pick it up, its brass casing cold against your glove. A snagged hinge clicks open, revealing a tarnished red glass chip around the dial's edge. Without thinking, you flip through your phone's flashlight modes, wishing this were a found-footage horror film where digital zoom would reveal something there. Instead, the field of view remains empty, though your skin prickles with the sense that you're not alone. Around you, the rock walls echo your shallow breaths. You shift your gaze to the rusty rails leading into the darkness. Rescue teams in 1962 followed these same tracks, reporting footprints that led in, then abruptly stopped on bare bedrock. Some said the prints continued, suspended in mid-air, just like the floating tracks from the 1940s accounts. You trace your gloved finger across a single shoe sole impression, it ends a full foot short of any disturbance. Skeptics chalk it up to erosion or a misaligned measurement, but whatever happened here defies simple explanation. At the mine's threshold, you notice a delicate spiral carved into the stone, almost identical to the bark carvings from Section 1's fallen cedar. Someone etched it with deliberate care, a coiling loop that narrows to nothing, then bursts outward like a stylized flame. You snap a photo, knowing experts might dismiss it as the work of a prankster, yet local lore insists these spirals mark spots where the phantom congregates. Fringe enthusiasts claim they're energy sigils, amplifying stray ghost frequencies. Historians still argue whether these symbols were inspired by Civil War deserters passing through or if they emerged spontaneously from collective fear. Your breath clouds in the chill as you edge past the tunnel entrance. The air inside is stale, metallic with the stink of damp earth. Somewhere ahead, a single drop of water echoes against the stone in a slow, metronomic beat. You swallow, recalling Lisa's final journal entry, "The air hums with something alive, and I've never felt more aware of every breath." That line was crossed out afterwards, replaced with the terse note, "Moving deeper, must see this through." You shiver, imagining her pen trembling, gravity tugging on the ink as she wrote by lantern light. You follow the rails into the dark, counting each rickety crossbeam. Halfway in, your light captures a flutter of pale fabric snagged on a jagged rock, frayed lace that could have belonged to Lisa's jacket. You tug gently, but the cloth remains anchored deep inside. The sensation of pulling something unseen follows, like tugging on a thread that refuses to unwind. In a voice quieter than a whisper, you call her name, "Lisa." Your words vanish into the black, unanswered. Beyond the snag lies a fork in the tunnel, one bore sloping steeply down, another veering off at a right angle. Rescue photos from 1962 document this exact junction, but the signage is long gone. Some say Lisa's lantern was found leaning against the right-angle wall, still flickering with phantom light. Locals swear the beam never fully extinguished, as if held by an unseen hand. You pause, remembering the luminescent eyes you glimpsed in Section 2's clearing, glowing orbs that blinked out when you dared to stare. Now the stake of your curiosity feels heavier, laced with dread. You shine your beam along the left tunnel, where the walls are slick with mineral residue. A shallow alcove reveals a rusted pickaxe head sunk into stone. Beneath it, scratched letters spell "Help me" in hasty capitals. You lean in, voice trembling, "Is that her?" Skeptics would call it a hoax, but family members of Lisa Carter still claim the irony of her plea, etched in rock, proves her last moments were frantic, desperate. Historians still argue whether the inscription predates her disappearance or was grafted later by someone seeking notoriety. Your heartbeat thunders as you approach the alcove, boots echoing hollowly against the rails. Something shifts behind you, a distant rumble that could be collapsing rock, or the slow exhalation of the forest itself. You whirl, but see only the tunnel's yawning blackness. A faint breeze, impossible this deep underground, brushes past your cheek. You taste cold iron on your tongue, catch the faintest whiff of pipe tobacco, and wonder if George Turner's experience from Section 2 reaches even into these depths. You exhale, feeling a mixture of relief and frustration. You haven't found Lisa, but every clue, compass, lace, pickaxe plea, threads together like scattered pages of her final journal. The cave-in that supposedly sealed the mine in 1910 seems irrelevant now, this shaft remains open, inviting you deeper. You steady yourself against the rough wall and remember the quote from an old ranger log, "No source found." That refrain rings in your mind, an invitation and a warning all at once. Stepping past the alcove, you notice scuffed footprints alongside yours, as if another pair of boots mirrored your path. The prints are fresh, impressing deep arcs in the soft silt. You pause, straining to hear any sign of a pursuer. The only sound is the plink-plink of dripping water, each drop echoing like a muted heartbeat. You shine your light ahead, and for a split second, you glimpse Lisa's face, framed by pale rock, eyes wide with fear. Then the beam wavers and the wall looms empty once more. Your breath catches. You recall the mainstream fascination with forensic profiling established in the 1950s by the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit, techniques that might have solved Lisa's case if they'd existed 2 decades earlier. You advance, every muscle taut, willing yourself to find more. Because in Selma Woods, thought you would leave after a quick look, but the darkness has you in its grip now. The mind's mouth yawns behind you, and you wonder if you, too, might vanish without a trace, just another name added to the county sheriff's thin files. You swallow and press on, deeper still, driven by the same obsession that drew Lisa here. The rails rattle softly under your feet as if responding to your resolve. Ahead, the tunnel walls seem to pulse, narrowing until it feels like the earth itself is closing in. You remember her final scrawled words, "Must see this through," and you realize that, whether you find her or not, you're bound to this place by the same unbreakable thread of mystery. You squint into the dim light as you step off trail, treading where rescue teams once fanned out like moths drawn to a flame. In the winter of 1962, just days after Lisa Carter's disappearance, 40 volunteers, rangers, Boy Scouts, and elderly townsfolk scoured Selma Woods. They moved in methodical lines, calling her name into the hush. It was one of the first times the county organized such a concerted search party, echoing a methodology refined when the Chicago police in the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition employed grid searches to locate missing fairgoers amid the crowds. You breathe in the cold air, tasting the slightest tang of displaced earth. Somewhere ahead, the ground slopes down toward a cluster of lichen-coated rocks that rescue teams identified as a high-interest zone. They'd noticed a pattern, stones nudged away from their usual perches, forming half-circles like jagged smiles. You crouch to inspect one such boulder, fingertips tracing its disturbed soil. Beneath your fingers, a faint carving, an angular spiral, more rigid than the looping sigils found in Section 3's mine tunnel, yet unmistakably related. Fringe hunters later dubbed these phantoms' kisses, claiming they mark passageways between this world and the next. Behind you, the pines murmur in the breeze. In 1901, Scotland Yard officially adopted Sir Edward Henry's fingerprint classification, revolutionizing how investigators matched prints at crime scenes. You imagine how handy that system would have been here, if only someone had lifted the prints from these stones. In the 1962 search, volunteers dusted the carvings with flour and ash, hoping ridges might emerge. Instead, they found nothing but powdery residue and the faint echo of their own breathing. Historians still argue whether those prints were removed by rain, or if they never existed at all. A sniff of stale pipe tobacco, like the scent George Turner described in Section 2, drifts across your nostrils. You pause, scanning the tree trunks around you. On a nearby birch, someone, perhaps a rescuer, perhaps something else, had carved an ornate keyhole shape. The gouges are fresh enough that sap oozes slowly from the wounds in glistening beads. You can almost hear the bark sigh as you trace the outline. Local whisperers claim this keyhole signifies the phantom's own entry point, a portal that only opens under a harvest moon. You shiver, remembering how Raymond Cole in Section 2 saw robes dripping moisture, as though someone had just stepped through. The search teams also found odd rope coils hanging from low branches, loosely knotted as if awaiting use. In some spots, the rope was braided with pine needles, an artful, unsettling touch. You lean in, pressing your ear to the trunk. The rope swings lazily, tapping the bark in a slow, steady rhythm not dictated by wind. Fringe enthusiasts insist the coils were one-way communication devices, strings to convey the phantom's whispers to anyone patient enough to listen. You close your eyes, imaging a faint static, like an AM radio left between stations. Underfoot, the soil is churned and muddy from dozens of boots. Scatter a few feet away lies a steel canteen dented in half, its interior etched with tiny symbols so fine you need a magnifying glass to decipher them. You retrieve your phone's macro lens and peer closely, a lupin cross motif, echoed in the carvings from Sections 1 and 3. Someone, long ago, had gone to great lengths to leave this breadcrumb. Skeptics later argued the symbols were nothing more than deer tracks overlaid by dripping sap. Yet members of the original search party insisted on their deliberate geometry. Historians still argue whether these marks were premeditated warnings or mere forest ephemera. You stand and brush cold pine needles from your jacket, glancing toward a shallow depression where a rescue dog stationed itself, barking into an empty clearing, then abruptly went silent. It was the only time any canine refused to advance. Trainers later swore the dog's hair stood on end, tail rigid like a flagstaff. Fringe literature elevated that moment to proof of an invisible predator. You crouch to examine the depression, hoof-shaped indentations swirl unpredictably, as if someone, or something, had danced there before fading into the mist. A low groan of wind stirs the canopy. You recall reading that in 1971, investigative journalism first broadly exposed flaws in police procedures, prompting communities to question official reports. Here in Selma Woods, local authorities had chalked up the missing symbols and displaced rocks to pranksters with too much time on their hands. Yet the precision of carvings and the eeriness of the rock formations defy simple mischief. You step closer, fingertips brushing a series of shallow trenches gouged into slate-gray stone. They form an arrow pointing deeper into the thicket, compelling, insistent. Your flashlight beam slides across a moss-covered boulder and catches a glint of something metallic wedged in a crack. You reach down and extract an old pocket watch, its glass face cracked but ticking faintly. The hands are frozen at 3:17, just minutes after sunset on that fateful night Lisa Carter disappeared. You wrap it carefully in a cloth from your pack, realizing at once that this belonged to someone in those search parties. Maybe to one of the Boy Scouts from Section 2, awestruck by the lullaby they heard. You flip the watch over, revealing an engraving, "For RT, find the way." A sudden rustle behind you makes you spin, but only branches sway. The forest seems to sigh again, as though satisfied by your discovery. Beneath your boot, a splinter of wood reveals a trace of red paint, another nod to the carousel phantom motif introduced in Section 2. You flick the splinter into your hand and stare at the chipped color that once adorned carnival wagons. The resonance is uncanny, weaving together clues from across decades. You tap your flashlight twice, recalling the search party's signal code from Section 2's Boy Scout accounts. 2 taps meant all clear, but no one ever answered. You wonder if that code still lingers here, unanswered. Above you, moonlight filters through the canopy, spotlighting an arch of twisted branches that frames the clearing. It feels like the forest is offering you a ceremonial gateway, daring you to step through. Your breath catches in your throat as you realize the rescue teams left behind more than campfires and camp stoves. They left questions carved into stone and bark, puzzles meant to draw seekers deeper, just as you've been drawn. The chill air wraps around you, pressing close. Somewhere in the thicket beyond, the phantom watches, gauging your resolve. The forest leans in, and you realize that the search never truly ended, it only changed shape, brushing its shadows into every carved spiral and displaced rock. You exhale slowly, chest rising and falling like a tide. Each clue feels like a whispered invitation and a warning, proceed, if you dare. You step past the boulder, pocket watch tucked safely away, and press on toward the next cluster of signs. The woods press tighter still, eager to show you more, or to swallow you whole. You settle onto a fallen log beneath a gnarled cedar, your recorder humming softly in your gloved hand. The air is impossibly still, save for the distant drip of condensation on decaying leaves. In 1959, psychologist Konstantin Raudive popularized electronic voice phenomenon research by claiming to capture spirit voices on tape, a milestone that turned static into possibility. Tonight, you aim to test that legacy here, where whispers and footsteps have been reported for decades. Your breath fogs the air as you press record, the device's red light blinking like an uncertain heartbeat. A faint breeze stirs overhead, coaxing pine needles to tickle the microphone. You lean closer, listening for the subtlest fluctuation in the silence. The forest floor is carpeted with needles so thick your boots barely make a crunch, yet you swear you hear soft scuffing just beyond the glow of your lantern. It's the same uneasy hush you felt in Section 1, as if the woods themselves are holding their breath. Moments pass like minutes, then seconds stretch into heavy infinity. A low murmur drifts through the dark, so faint you almost dismiss it as wind. But then the murmur solidifies into fragmented syllables that sound like words. You replay the clip in your mind, Li Ave, Nu, Traces. The voice is barely above a whisper, warped as though filtered through water. Fringe enthusiasts call this the phantom's breath, insisting the entity speaks warnings to intruders. Historians still argue whether such EVP captures are genuine communications or mere auditory pareidolia in a hungry mind. A sudden snap echoes behind you, sharp as a rifle shot. You whip around, lantern beam carving a cone of light into the undergrowth. Nothing moves. Your pulse hammers against your ribs. You remember George Turner's report from Section 2, he smelled stale pipe tobacco just before the phantom appeared. You take a cautious sniff, the dank earth and pine still rule, but beneath them, a whisper of smoke lingers, as though Turner's phantom scent has followed you back. You switch the recorder to playback mode, holding it aloft like a seance conductor. The speaker crackles, and you hear it again, Li Ave, Nu, Traces. This time, the words feel urgent, drawn out as though stretched by a phantom hand. You shiver, recalling Lisa Carter's compass spinning wildly in Section 3, an echo of unseen energies. In your headphones, you catch another ripple, what sounds like distant footsteps crunching on brittle twigs. You stand and follow the noise, lantern swinging like a pendulum. Each footstep is deliberate, measured, impossible to pin to any animal. Deer tiptoe with softness, wolves pad with purpose. These steps are too shallow for a bear, too deliberate for a deer. You recall the floating footprints described in Section 2, hovering inches above the ground before vanishing. Now you listen for their echo. A crunch, then nothing. You step forward, gingerly pressing your boot into the leaf litter, and discover no depression at all. It's as though the forest floor rejects your weight. Your heart skips. You crouch and shine your light on the undisturbed carpet of needles. There's no sign of passage, just the ghostly echo you heard. You rise, voice unsteady, who's there? Only silence answers. Then, as you pivot, you catch the recorder picking up a melodic trill, faint but unmistakable. To you, it sounds like the distant wobble of a calliope, the same warped carnival tune mentioned in Section 2. Fringe lore claims the phantom uses that melody to lure wanderers deeper. Historians still argue whether early carnival caravans ever passed through these woods or if the tune is purely a construct of collective fear. You take a tentative step toward the calliope's echo, each footfall magnified by your thudding pulse. The recorder's speaker crackles again, this time with an overlapping murmur, Fiend, the Watchich. The words hit you like ice water. You think of the broken pocket watch you found in Section 4, its hands frozen at 3:17. Could the phantom be guiding you back to that relic? Or warning you not to touch it? You grit your teeth against a shiver and press on. Branches claw at your coat as you move between the trees. Your lantern's glow dances over patches of carved spirals and keyhole shapes, tokens you traced back in Section 4. Now they look almost luminous, as if infused with some hidden power. The murmur follows you, weaving through the trunks, fading and resurging. You replay the recording in your mind, noting the dropped consonants, the wavering pitch. The device labels it as Track 5, a fitting coincidence. Up ahead, the undergrowth parts to reveal a shallow dip in the forest floor, a hollow ringed by stones that must have been displaced by some ancient hand. You step to its edge and raise the recorder. A sudden gust rattles the stones, and the calliope trill warps into something darker, scraping like a rusty hinge. You lean in, breath catching, as the speaker emits a low, guttural chuckle, something you've never heard before. Fringe accounts refer to this as the phantom's laugh, claiming it chills the soul more than any scream. You close your eyes, feeling that chuckle reverberate in your chest. When you open them, the stones lie still. You scan your surroundings, every carved symbol, every scraggly branch feels imbued with intent. The murmur returns one last time, go back, and then nothing. You are flooded with awareness of your isolation beneath the dense canopy. Each pine now bears witness. The call of a distant owl punctuates the final silence. You crouch and tap stop on the recorder, heart hammering. The red light clicks off, leaving you in near darkness. You pull out your phone's flashlight and shine it on the hollow. The stone's shadows twist in the beam, forming an arrow pointing deeper into the woods, just as engraved trenches did in Section 4. You feel the tug of curiosity, the same irresistible pull that drew Lisa Carter toward the mine. With trembling fingers, you slot the recorder into your pocket and rise. The temperature seems to plunge, frosting your breath in the lantern glow. You inhale, tasting stale tobacco again, a final callback to Turner's encounter. It's as if the phantom has marked every chapter of this tale with a signature scent. As you turn to leave, you pause and hit play on the recorder one more time. The speaker crackles, and you hear not just one voice, but many, faint echoes of searching calls: Lisa, help, hello. The overlapping tones blend into a chorus of desperate intonations, each fragment a fragment of someone else's fear. You swallow hard, recalling the multi-layered testimonies of Boy Scouts from Section 2 and the rhythmic rope taps from Section 4. All these voices converge here, in this midnight cathedral of pines. You step away from the hollow, lantern held high, and listen to the forest settle around you. The whispers fade, footsteps vanish, and only your boots punctuate the silence. You tap the recorder off for good and secure it in your pack, mind racing with the evidence you've gathered. The woods seem to exhale, releasing their hold on your nerves, just for a moment. You resume walking, boots sinking into that same soft carpet of needles you traversed in Section 1. The mist coils around your ankles as before, carrying a faint sugar tang reminiscent of Section 1's caramel apples. You glance back once, half expecting to see a shadow drifting between the trees, but the forest remains motionless. Tonight, you've collected voices from the dark, captured whispers and phantom footsteps that defy easy dismissal. You've tapped into a tradition stretching back to Edison's phonograph experiments and Rodov's EVP sessions, all in pursuit of a story that refuses to stay silent. And though historians still argue whether these recordings reveal genuine spirits or simply the mind's longing for meaning, you know one thing for certain: the woods have spoken, and they've left you with questions that echo like footsteps in the night. You tread more cautiously now, senses sharpened by each carved spiral and echo of distant laughter. In 1888, the American Folklore Society was founded to preserve folk narratives and legends, a mainstream effort to separate myth from history, though sometimes they got tangled together in the process. You feel that same weaving of truth and tale here, as local residents insist the phantom in Selma Woods began as a guardian spirit, watching over lost travelers rather than luring them to doom. Years ago, an elderly woodsman named Clara Jenkins swore she saw a flicker of lantern light guiding her out of a sudden fog bank, a soft voice whispering directions through the trees. By the time she reached her car, she claimed the light had vanished like mist. This phantom guardian version reshaped countless eyewitness testimonies. Hikers who'd felt unseen pressure on their shoulders or heard gentle humming began to believe they'd been protected rather than pursued. Fringe enthusiasts even assert that the guardian wears an antique ranger's hat and carries a polished brass whistle to warn the unwary. But folklore is slippery. In the 1812 publication of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, collectors often polished Grimm stories into gentler forms for wider audiences, proof that storytelling itself can blur fact and fiction. You recall the bitter chill in Section 1's clearing, then the comforting scent of stale pipe tobacco from Section 2, details once scary, now recast as reassuring signatures of a benevolent watcher. Scholars still debate whether these comforting spin-offs are protective myth-making born from communal fear or later creative embellishments by thrill-seeking tour guides. You stand by a cluster of moss-draped oaks where chains of driftwood dangle like prayer beads. Local rumor says each stick represents a lost hiker redeemed by the guardian's guidance. You run a finger along the smooth wood and imagine Clara's trembling hands leaving a bark-carved name beside hers. Historians still argue whether those driftwood chains were left by early conservationists marking safe trails, or if they're the work of pranksters playing on the legend. Either way, the effect is profound. you find yourself glancing at every trunk, wondering if each knot is an invitation rather than a threat. Not far off, you spot a small cairn of stones painted with faint red crosses, the so-called sentinel stones said to ward off malevolent forces. In medieval Europe, travelers arranged such markers to signal safe passage, a fact documented in 14th-century pilgrimage records. Here, a quirky local variation insists that placing your own stone earns you the guardian's favor, and ensures your path stays clear. You lift a pebble from your pocket and add it to the tower, feeling a curious warmth slide through your gloves, as though the forest acknowledges your gesture. As you resume walking, the spirals from Section 1's fallen cedar drift into view, carved now into a living birch. Some say the guardian taught settlers these symbols as warding signs, others maintain they were improvised by terrified loggers mapping sightings. Fringe theory posits that when moonlight strikes these spirals at certain angles, they glow faintly, an effect documented by a 1995 amateur photographer using infrared film. Historians still debate whether those glowing carvings were a genuine optical phenomenon or long-exposed film artifacts mistaken for paranormal light. Your boots crunch on a scattering of pine cones, and you pause at a shrine of sorts, an old lantern braced between two stumps, its glass clouded with age. Beneath it, a weathered notebook lies open to a page listing names and times, a logbook left by a wandering hermit who claimed the phantom visited him nightly. You flip through and see entries like "Thank you for the warmth" scrawled beneath another spiral sketch. You trace the notebook's binding with reverence, imagining that guardian's gentle breeze turning the pages. Yet as comforting as these guardian tales feel, you remember the cave tannin scent and jittering compass in Section 3, the scraping laughter in Section 5. It's one thing to believe you're being watched over, it's another to wonder if that watcher decides who lives and who doesn't. Scholars still argue whether benevolent folklore breeds complacency, lulling people into false security, or if it's a natural balm that helps communities cope with unexplained tragedies. You step away from the shrine, turning a final glance at the lantern's muted glow. The woods press in, full of dualities, protections that resemble warnings, whispers that could be lullabies or siren calls. You realize that every new guardian tale overlays the older, darker accounts, reshaping your own perception of each sound and scent you encounter. Whether the phantom is warder or wraith, protector or predator, depends on the story you choose to honor. As you continue down the winding trail, the undergrowth seems to part at your feet, guiding you onward. The wind shifts, carrying that faint caramel apple tang from Section 1, now sweet rather than sinister. You follow it deeper, caught between trust and dread, knowing that at any moment the guardian's lantern could illuminate your path, or cast a shadow you might never escape. You crouch by a shallow imprint in the loamy soil, torchlight dancing over its exaggerated ridges. It's one of the levitating tracks from Section 2, the same odd footprint that hovers above the ground before fading. Forensic experts first flagged these in 1975 when a university criminology team revisited the case, noting that the soil's compression gradient is impossible, the weight distribution doesn't match any human or animal gait. In 1896, Scotland Yard under Sir Robert Anderson became one of the first agencies to use systematic crime scene photography, demonstrating that even early forensic images can mislead when lighting and perspective are manipulated. You lean forward, examining the groove with a gloved fingertip. The edges are unnaturally crisp, almost too perfect for damp forest earth. Skeptics argue these tracks were carved the night before by pranksters wielding wooden molds, or even by misguided souvenir hunters seeking fame. You recall Section 4's rescue dog, which refused to cross that very spot, its hackles raised not by ghostly presence, but perhaps by the scent of fresh wood shavings. Fringe photographers have gone further, they claim that under ultraviolet light, faint rune-like patterns appear around the footprint's perimeter, suggesting energy sigils meant to amplify paranormal activity. Historians still argue whether these patterns were etched by Civil War deserters, or if they're nothing more than fungal growth fluorescing under special lamps. You rise and pad across to a makeshift easel, a moss-covered tree stump where someone pinned an old Polaroid. The photograph is warped by time and moisture, the image shows a blurred figure among the pines, its form smeared like a smeared charcoal smudge. Forensic photography textbooks teach that emulsion degradation, water damage, and camera shake can all produce ghostly artifacts. Indeed, analysts from the State Crime Lab once enhanced the Polaroid for a televised special, only to conclude the figure aligns perfectly with a knotted tree trunk and a stray branch, nothing supernatural. Yet conspiracy blogs insist the enhancement revealed faint hands gripping the bark. You pull on latex gloves and trace the photo's edges, careful not to disturb any residual sap that might hold fingerprint evidence. The original print was dusted for prints in 1983, resulting in only 2 partial whorls, neither matching any of the local missing persons, nor the sheriff's own deputy roster. Critics highlight that fingerprint dust adheres differently on smooth chemical-coated surfaces than on aged photographic paper, raising doubts about whether those whorls are even human. You tilt the Polaroid into the lantern glow and notice a series of parallel scratches across its emulsion, likely from someone brushing ash or grit against its surface. Historians still argue whether those scratches were intentional tampering or the unfortunate result of storing the photo next to a metal matchbox. Setting the photograph aside, you crouch again by the modern footprints, your own and these uncanny echoes. You snap a close-up with your phone, then zoom in until the grain threatens to pixelate. You recall that in 1924, the first U.S. Supreme Court case to admit fingerprint evidence hinged on the clarity of photographic lifts, underscoring that imagery can skew perception. You swipe between your images and watch the ridges shift with each adjustment in brightness, like a carnival mirror bending reality. Fringe videographers later claimed that if you stare long enough, the prints twitch, an illusion caused by pareidolia, your brain hunting patterns in random noise. A low breeze stirs the needles overhead. You reach into your pack for an infrared thermometer, another tool skeptics snatched up at the 1991 Cryptozoology Expo. The print's surface reads exactly the same temperature as the surrounding soil, suggesting the imprint wasn't made recently. But local folklorists counter that paranormal disturbances can equalize thermal readings, a concept borrowed from haunted house investigators who claim ghostly hands leave cold spots on walls. Historians still argue whether these thermal anomalies ever held up under controlled experiments or simply reflected faulty equipment. You stand and pace a few steps back, glancing at the stump where the Polaroid lies. On the ground near it, you spot a half-burned camera flash bulb, a remnant from the FBI's early mid-century forays into infrared photography. Agents testing night vision techniques in the 1940s discovered that flash bulbs leave telltale artifacts on film, often creating phantom glows that resemble orbs. High-resolution scans of the Polaroid reveal exactly that, a diffuse halo around the central blur, consistent with a mismatched flash setting. Skeptics seized on this analysis, arguing the so-called glowing eyes in Section 2's viral footage were just exposure flare. Yet you can't shake the knot in your stomach as you compare artifacts. You pinch the edge of the Polaroid and lift it, only to reveal an inscription on the back, taken September 14, 72, at 2 a.m. That date matches the night the infrared footage first circulated on a local TV show, long before video sharing sites. It means someone preserved the print alongside the reels, perhaps believing in its authenticity. Fringe archivists maintain that the print's paper stock was discontinued in 1970, making any 1972 Polaroid a valuable collector's item, and fueling rumors of staged reprints. Historians still argue whether the print's provenance is genuine or exemplary of an early reprint fraud scandal. You exhale slowly, feeling the weight of every expert critique and every amateur embellishment converging here. The forest around you seems to watch, its pines whispering with the accumulated doubts of decades. You slide the photo back beneath a protective cover of moss, respecting the evidence, real or contrived, that has shaped every whispered rumor you've chased. Before moving on, you pause at a cluster of stones where a handheld camera was mounted decades ago. Its rusty bracket still clings to a sturdy oak. In 1978, a visiting tourist left a Super 8 film rolling overnight, hoping to capture something, or nothing. When the film was developed, nothing remained but static and splices of blank frames. Experts concluded the camera overheated, melting parts of the film strip. Yet fringe forums claim the missing frames conceal evidence of the phantom's physical form, erased to protect sacred secrets. Historians still argue whether the amateur setup ever functioned properly or if the entire episode was an elaborate stunt. You pack away your camera and prints, each marked with chain of custody tags you fabricated. Skeptics may scoff at your methods, but you know that in Selma Woods, every image tells two tales, one of objective inquiry, and one of insatiable mystery. You brush earth from your knees, shine your light toward the east where dawn's first glow will soon peer through the canopy, and steel yourself for the questions still to come. You skirt around a ring of mossy boulders, the air growing colder as twilight deepens. Beneath your feet, the needles of ancient pines cushion each step, but your mind races back to a different kind of ground, battlefields scarred by conflict. After the Civil War ended in 1865, the U.S. Army recorded more than 100,000 desertions as soldiers abandoned their posts, vanishing into woods much like these. Some locals insist those deserters didn't simply disappear, they lingered, their guilt and fear imprinting on the land itself. Historians still argue whether those first-hand accounts of Confederate ghosts near Selma Woods inspired the phantom legend or if the tale originated decades later as a campfire story. You pause beneath a low-hanging branch, brushing damp bark from your jacket, and imagine the weary figures of Union and Confederate soldiers slipping through these trees under cover of darkness. Fringe lore claims that the phantom sometimes appears clad in a tattered gray uniform, the rust red of dried blood still matted to its collar. You shiver, recalling the metallic tang in your mouth when you inspected the old pocket watch in Section 4, a relic engraved with RT, find the way. Could RT stand for a deserter like Robert Taylor, who vanished from his regiment and was rumored to haunt these woods? Scholars still debate whether that engraving was added later by folklorists or if it truly belonged to a missing soldier. Ahead, you spot what looks like an eroded campsite rim, smoke-stained stones arranged in a rough circle. You crouch, letting your lantern beam dance over charred wood fragments and the faint outline of a collapsed tent. In 1882, the Society for Psychical Research formed in London, marking one of the first attempts to study hauntings with scientific rigor. They documented countless reports of phantom campfires flickering in battle-scarred forests, attributing them to residual stone tape effects. You wonder if a similar phenomenon plays out here, replaying the desperation of deserters huddled by their own dying embers. The wind sighs through the branches, carrying a whisper that sounds like distant marching feet. You lift your gaze to the canopy, catching glimpses of skeletal limbs swaying against the moonlight. The forest around you feels suspended between past and present, each rustle echoing with the weight of untold stories. Fringe historians argue that deserter legends were deliberately conflated with carnival rumors, hence the carousel phantom overlap, where laughter and calliope music waft through the pines. You shake your head, attempting to separate credible oral histories from sensationalist embellishments. Your hand brushes against a carved spiral on a nearby oak, identical to the ones you traced in sections 1 and 3. These loops and crosses might have been cartographers' marks left by deserters mapping their escape routes, or they could be purely decorative graffiti added by later thrill-seekers. Historians still argue whether the earliest carvings date from the 1860s or the 1920s. You stare at the spiral until the lantern's flicker makes it seem alive, swirling like a vortex that could draw you in. You rise and move onward, boots crunching on fractured pine cones. In the distance, what might be an owl hoots, though it sounds eerily like the muted crack of a rifle shot. During the Reconstruction era, newspapers printed occasional dispatches of phantom soldiers haunting former battle sites, warning travelers away. Mainstream records show that by 1870, one Massachusetts regiment reported spectral figures marching at dawn, despite no living men present. You can't help but compare those accounts to the slow, deliberate footfalls you've chased through these woods. A sudden gust swirls a veil of mist around your ankles, and you inhale the damp, earthy aroma. Then, beneath that, a faint undercurrent of burnt cordite, a smell historians link to Civil War-era ammunition. Fringe enthusiasts insist you can still smell exploded gunpowder near certain carvings. Skeptics attribute the scent to decaying pine needles reacting with moisture. You close your eyes, letting the scent settle. The duality of interpretations presses in on you, just as the phantom legend balances between wartime tragedy and carnival whimsy. You pause at the edge of a steep ravine, peering down where a narrow stream gurgles over smooth stones. Locals tell of deserters using hidden pathways along waterways to evade capture. In turn, they left token cairns to mark safe crossings. You scan the opposite bank and spot a small pile of flat stones, carefully stacked. Each bears a single, shallow notch carved with a pocket knife. You step closer, recognizing the keyhole shapes from Section 4 now doubled into twin slits, like eyes watching you. Scholars still debate whether these cairns were natural rockfall rearranged by hikers, or deliberate markers laid by soldiers who vanished into the forest's embrace. Your chest tightens as you recall Clara Jenkins's guardian tale from Section 6, the flickering lantern light that guided her out of a fog bank. Could deserter spirits have warped over time into benevolent protectors? Fringe theory posits that surviving soldiers, tormented by guilt, bound their restless souls to the land, protecting those who honored their memory with stones and spirals. Historians still argue whether protective folklore emerged organically from communal empathy or was retrofitted to sanitize a darker legacy of abandonment. Focusing on the cairn, you kneel and brush loose soil away, revealing initials etched into the top rock, CW. You lift your lantern for a closer look, 2 letters overlapped with faint lines reminiscent of cavalry insignia. Could this be the mark of a corporal who deserted Company W? Or is it another modern prank? You snap a photo, planning to cross-reference regimental records later. The forest accepts your intrusion silently, its secrets neither confirmed nor denied. You rise, pocketing the photo, and press up the ravine's slope. Each branch you pass bears the spiral motif, sometimes accompanied by tiny rusted nails hammered into the wood. Fringe devotees claim these nails anchor the soul to this plane, preventing it from wandering fully into the afterlife. You rub your thumb over one nail head, cold, rough, and wonder if you're disturbing more than wood and iron. Scholars still debate whether such apotropaic practices were common among frontier communities or invented by modern ghost tour guides. Higher up, the trail levels out and opens into a clearing strewn with dead ferns. In the center lies a rectangular stone slab half buried in moss. You crouch, wiping away decades of growth to reveal a carved date, June 66. That date doesn't align with Civil War years, but it might mark when amateur antiquarians examined the site. Fringe accounts link 1866 anniversaries to secret vigil gatherings of deserter descendants, but no records confirm such meetings. Historians still argue whether post-war veterans held clandestine reunions here or if that date commemorates a folkloric festival that faded without notice. Your lantern beam shifts to a half-buried pickaxe head, similar to the one you found in Section 3's mine tunnel. You tug it free and inspect the wooden haft, noting initials scratched into the handle, JB. You think of Lisa Carter's frantic pickaxe plea, "Help me." Could JB be an earlier victim, or perhaps a deserter who repurposed tools for shelter? Scholars still debate whether these tools belong to miners, soldiers, or storytellers seeking atmospheric props. The moon breaks through drifting clouds, illuminating rusted chain loops hanging from a nearby oak. You recall the rope coils from Section 4, woven with pine needles, tapping as if alive. Here, the chains rattle loosely, echoing like distant manacles. Fringe enthusiasts interpret chain rattles as echoes of imprisoned souls, while skeptics suggest the wind and metal fatigue conspire to produce the effect. Historians still argue whether the chains were left by lawmen seeking deserters or by thrill-seekers recreating prison imagery. You exhale, the cold air visible in front of your face. The scholarly debates swirl in your mind as tangibly as the mist at your feet. Each carved spiral, each rusted nail, each fallen tool seems to carry layers of meaning, military history, mining lore, carnival legend, and whispered ghost stories all jostling for prominence. Whether the phantom in Selma Woods began as the restless shadow of a deserter, a protective spirit guiding the lost, or an elaborate prank that grew teeth over time, remains an open question, one that you, and future visitors, will continue to ask beneath this silent canopy. A distant crow caws, and you stand, chest tightening with anticipation. You realize that even as you seek closure, the legend refuses to settle into neat boxes of fact or fiction. You press onward, the ridgeline curving toward darker woods, ready to follow whichever clues this place offers next, fully aware that scholars, skeptics, and believers will all claim victory in the end, yet none can truly prove what lies hidden in Selma Woods. You crouch behind a fallen log, hands trembling as you power up the infrared camcorder you've hauled along every step of this journey. The screen flickers to life, bathing the undergrowth in an otherworldly green glow. It was just last year that night vision goggles became affordable enough for avid paranormal investigators to carry into woods like these, an innovation first field-tested by military scouts during World War II to detect enemy movements under cover of darkness. You remember how, in Section 2, George Turner's scent of stale pipe tobacco marked the phantom's approach. Tonight, this night vision feed might finally show you its true form. Your breath fogs the viewfinder as you sweep the beam across mossy roots and half-buried stones. A low drone hums from the camera's fan, reminding you of the soft background hum you suggested at the start. A bead of sweat trickles down your temple despite the chill. In your headset, you can almost hear the distant echo of the calliope melody from Section 5, only this time, it's replaced by the camera's mechanical whir. Suddenly, two pinpoints of light blaze into view, perched atop the log like eyes set in a gnarled skull. They glow an eerie white-green, reflecting the infrared illumination. Your finger jerks on the record button, and the camera clicks into continuous capture. The eyes blink once, slowly, as if sizing you up. Fringe lore calls this the phantom's gaze, insisting that anyone who meets those glowing eyes risks being drawn into the forest's shadowy veins forever. Skeptics, however, argue these could be nothing more than owls or deer caught in the wrong spectrum, their retinas reflecting infrared much like animal eye shine in headlights. Historians still argue whether these sightings mark genuine entities or are simply optical artifacts born of our own expectations. You hold your breath, leaning closer. The log silhouette shifts beneath the eyes, downward, then upward, as if the creature perched behind the trunk is flexing. You recall the viral video that swept through online forums last month, where a similar pair of lights appeared on the same log during a live stream. That footage sparked a frenzy. Some commentators insisted it showed a yokai-like forest spirit, others traced the frames back to a prank involving remote-controlled LED modules. In mainstream news coverage, the technology behind that LED trick was detailed in an exposé on YouTube setups, showing how simple circuits can mimic nocturnal reflections. Your pulse hammers in your ears as you whisper, "Show yourself." Nothing moves, but the eyes remain fixed on you, unblinking now, radiating impatience. You sweep the beam around, trying to catch a second pair of eyes or any silhouette. The camera's green light washes over a spiral carving on the log's side, the same Lupin cross motif you first saw in Section 1. Something about the way the infrared highlights its grooves makes it seem alive, like a portal etched in wood. You recall Lisa Carter's compass spinning wildly there in Section 3, this spiral might govern not only physical landmarks but spectral thresholds too. Minutes stretch on as you hover, transfixed. Your finger hovers over the zoom control, but you resist the urge. Digital zoom degrades detail, and you need clarity. Instead, you toggle the camcorder's playback, rewinding to catch any subtle motion you may have missed. On screen, the log looks motionless, but the eyes blink again, slower this time, as if mimicking human lids. The effect is so unnervingly precise that you briefly consider scientific explanations. Perhaps a small mammal, like a raccoon, with unusually reflective eyes, paused there long enough to create the illusion. Yet in all your hours of hiking, you've never heard scurrying or the rustle of tiny paws at a fallen log like this. A twig snaps behind you, and you whirl, but only shadows shift between trunks. When you turn back, the eyes have moved slightly, toward the right end of the log. You swallow hard, recalling the Boy Scouts' lullaby in Section 2, fading into silence just before something unseen gathered at the edge of their campsite. You tilt the camera downward, hoping to catch a glimpse of paws, fur, or feathers, but all you see is the empty log and the mossy floor. The eyes hover, then blink out, leaving nothing but the log's silent silhouette. Your heart pounds as you replay the clip, two glows lingering for nearly 7 seconds before vanishing. Fringe bloggers dubbed that viral video Selma's stare, arguing that the entity can control its own infrared signature. They even speculated that if you capture enough frames, you might see a spectral shape coalescing around the lights. On mainstream science blogs, engineers dissected the pixel patterns, concluding the lights were consistent with a small LED strip concealed in hollowed wood. Historians still argue whether such analyses fairly consider the phenomenon or simply dismiss any anomaly that defies easy categorization. You power down the camera, stepping silently toward the log. The forest feels charged, every pine needle a potential witness. You kneel and place your gloved hand on the rough bark, pressing your palm flat over the spiral carving. A shiver shoots through you as if the tree itself is alive, pulsing beneath your touch. You breathe in the damp scent of pine and earth, but beneath it, you swear you catch a whiff of something metallic, like the charred pickaxe head from Section 3, or the scorched stones in Section 4's search zone. As you rise, the moon peeks through clouds, casting a pale spotlight on the log. You step back and sweep a flashlight across it, no hidden wires, no compartments, nothing to suggest a mechanical trick. The plantation-grown cedar you inspected in Section 1 had no hollows beyond superficial cracks. Still, your infrared recording remains ambiguous, genuine or hoax, you can't say for sure. A sudden gust rattles the branches, and you glance upward, heart in your throat. Somewhere overhead, you hear the faintest click, like shutters closing on an unseen camera. You spin, but again see nothing. When you look back at the log, the carving glows faintly in the silver moonlight, the spiral center shadowed as if housing invisible pupils. You exhale slowly. Whatever you recorded will be examined frame by frame in labs, chat rooms, and living rooms alike. Some will swear it's proof of something beyond our senses, others will dissect the pixels until it dissolves into noise. In Selma Woods, evidence sparks faith and rancor in equal measure. You recall the infrared footage from Section 2 that first circulated on local TV, igniting a community worried for hikers. That grainy black and white clip, two luminous dots flickering for just a moment, became a cultural touchstone, inspiring amateur night vision hunts up and down the logging trail. You slide the camera's memory card into your pocket and back away from the log. The silence that follows feels charged, as though the forest itself breathes around you. You brush a stray branch from your jacket and glance back once more. The log stands empty, its spiral carvings etched into wood and myth alike. You resume your path, steps echoing over pine needle carpets, replaying the footage in your mind. The phantom's eyes, flaming in infrared, were more vivid than any tale you've heard. Mainstream legacies of wartime imaging and experimental night vision lend technical plausibility to what you saw, yet fringe whispers cling like moss to bark. Historians still argue whether this footage will ever transcend the divide between hoax and haunting, but you know one thing, once you've seen those eyes glowing in the dark, the woods never look the same again. You step into deeper shadow, letting the memory of that log guide you onward, every pine now a potential stage for the phantom's next act. You push through a curtain of brambles, the beam from your lantern slicing through damp gloom. Slippery mud clings to your boots, each step leaving a print that echoes the strange footprints you've chased since Section 2. These are deeper, muddier, as if something heavier than a deer padded this way, yet the tread pattern is oddly human. You follow the tracks with quiet determination, recalling the scoutmaster's stories of footprints hovering above the ground before fading into nothing. Tonight, these prints sink fully into the earth, guiding you towards something unmistakably deliberate. The forest opens onto a small clearing ringed by slender birches. Your light rests on bent tent poles half buried in pine needles. A collapsed canopy sags like a broken rib cage, its canvas torn in ragged strips. You step closer and catch the acrid tang of old smoke, mingled with the faint sweetness of decaying paper. In 1986, DNA profiling revolutionized cold case investigations, allowing investigators to link suspects to physical evidence decades later. You wonder if these remnants could ever yield such clarity, or if the phantom's interference made conventional forensics impossible. Historians still argue whether early evidence at true crime scenes was mishandled by well-meaning but inexperienced volunteers, leaving gaps that fueled legend as much as fact. You crouch beside a circle of stones where embers once glowed. Charred fragments of a fire ring scatter like obsidian petals. Among them, you spot a scattering of notebook pages, their edges frayed and mottled with mildew. You pick up one sheet and inhale the musty scent of soaked ink. The page bears hurried scrawl, "I hear it breathing close," followed by a jagged tear that severs the next line. Fringe enthusiasts claim these torn journals belong to a hiker who escaped the phantom's gaze only to document its whispers, and that under the full moon, the pages stitched themselves back together, revealing hidden entries in invisible ink. You run your thumb along the tear, feeling the damp fibers give, as though the paper itself mourns its missing words. A gust of wind rustles the torn canvas overhead, sending a flurry of pages spiraling. One flutters at your feet, its last legible line reading, "Footprints led me here, but I'm not alone." Goosebumps rise along your arms. You recall the metallic click you thought you heard in Section 9, the phantom shutter closing on your night vision pursuit. Now, the torn journals seem to capture more than ink, they absorb fear, curiosity, and dread in equal measure. You stand and shine your lantern across the campsite. A battered camping stool lies overturned, its wooden legs scratched with tiny spirals and crosses, the same looping sigils you've traced throughout these woods. You kneel to examine them, tracing the grooves with a gloved fingertip. Each carve feels deliberate, as if someone marked trails in a secret language only the phantom understands. Skeptics suggest these marks were made by bored campers looking for souvenirs. Yet when you press the stool back to an upright position, it settles with a soft thud that reverberates through your chest, as if affirming the gravitas of those glyphs. Beyond the stool rests a battered thermos half filled with stagnant water. You unscrew the cap and sniff, a faint tang of stale coffee and moss. Sloshing the liquid, you catch sight of tiny flecks of rust that swirl like iron filings. You recall Section 4's canteen etched with lupin cross motifs, perhaps left by the same hand. Could the phantom have refilled this thermos over decades, maintaining a spectral campfire of remnants to lure wanderers? Historians still argue whether recurring campsite disturbances are the work of pranksters returning annually, or if they represent genuine supernatural preservation, a phantom hospitality that never cools. You pocket the thermos and move to the tent's entrance. The flaps are shredded, exposing the dark maw within. You shine your lantern inside and reveal the skeleton of a collapsed sleeping bag, its nylon shell mottled with stains you dare not identify. Underneath, a journal bound in cracked leather peeks out. You slide it free, its cover embossed with initials you recognize, LC. Your breath hitches, remembering Lisa Carter's fate from Section 3. A ripple of sadness passes through you. Fringe lore contends that if you read her final entries aloud here, the phantom will answer in its own voice. You resist the urge, wary of summoning something beyond recording or photography. Instead, you open the journal to the last complete page. The handwriting halts mid-sentence, "I've followed the prints this far, but the air grows thick. I think it's watching me," and then a violent rip. The next sheet is blank, save for a single spiral etched in deep gouge, as if clawed by desperate nails. The juxtaposition of intimate confession and angry symbol sends a chill through your spine. You close the journal gently, treating it like a fragile relic. A twig snaps behind you, and you pivot, lantern sweeping across the trees. Shadows pool and recede among the trunks. You duck back toward the tent, heart pounding. The vestiges of human habitation, journals, stool, thermos, feel like breadcrumbs in a rite of passage, daring you to proceed. Yet here, at this threshold, the phantom's presence is nearly tangible, in the way the wind channels through the torn canvas, in the low echo of dripping condensation from the tent seams. You stand in the center of the campsite, boots anchored in softened soil stamped by your own footprints and the mysterious tracks before you. You close your eyes and inhale, tasting damp earth, burnt wood, and the lingering sweetness of torn pages. It's a sensory collage that feels both ancient and immediate. In that moment, you sense the forest leaning in, its pines whispering with the accumulated weight of every hiker, scout, logger, and deserter who ever left a mark here. As you open your eyes, the campsite appears suspended in time, an abandoned theater where the final act never played out. You realize that these muddy tracks leading to desolation mirror every step in this saga, from the phantom's first whispered origins to your own hesitant wanderings. Each artifact, journals, carvings, footprints, threads together a tapestry of fear, folklore, and unanswered questions. Historians still argue whether tangible clues like torn pages and carved spirals belong in the realm of forensic evidence or folk narrative, but here, at the edge of desolation, those categories collapse into moss and shadow. You take one last slow turn, committing every detail to memory, the way the torn journals rustle in the breeze, the faint spiral scratched into the tent pole, the depth of the footprints vanishing into obscurity. Then you slip the journal into your pack, lantern raised high as you step back onto the muddy track. The prints that led you here seem to vanish where the forest floor reclaims them, leaving only your solitary path onward. With a steady breath, you follow the receding tracks deeper into the woods, heart anchored by curiosity and caution in equal measure. The abandoned camp retreats behind you, its echoes lingering like the final chords of a long-forgotten lullaby. You can almost hear the phantom's voice whispering in the wind, "Well done, now find the next clue." And as you move on, the forest exhales, ready to reveal its next secret. You step inside the forsaken shelter, lantern light quivering across the rippled canvas. Your breath blossoms in the cold, forming milky clouds that vanish as quickly as they appear. Frost clings to the tent's floor in crystalline patches, shimmering like broken glass beneath your boots. In 1922, forensic practitioners introduced the concept of algor mortis, measuring environmental cooling to estimate time of death, transforming temperature anomalies into crucial evidence at crime scenes. Yet these frost zones feel otherworldly, confined to places no vent or draft could reach. Historians still argue whether such microtemperature oddities are mere byproducts of nocturnal dew settling unevenly or signs of lingering spirits. You crouch low, shining your lantern onto a patch that resembles a human palm print, its ridges etched in delicate frost. An infrared thermometer in your pack registers the area at nearly 12 degrees Fahrenheit below the surrounding air, defying normal physics. Fringe lore dubs this imprint the icy palm, claiming it's the phantom's literal touch, frozen in time and space. Local rumor says that on moonless nights, these frost handprints form runic symbols eerily similar to the spiral sigils you've encountered since Section 1. You hesitate, recalling the lupin cross carving on the fallen cedar, the spiral scratched into the mine wall, and the keyhole mark on that birch. Here, the frost seems to encode those same secrets in cold. Your beam shifts to the tent ceiling, where scorch marks snake across the canvas in jagged lines. Blackened threads hang like charred veins, brittle to the touch. In 1932, J. Edgar Hoover inaugurated the FBI Crime Lab, introducing systematic burn pattern analysis to distinguish accidental fires from deliberate arson. You imagine agents laying out charred debris under a microscope, searching for accelerant traces. Yet these marks bear no telltale residue or soot, just a faint odor of ozone and singed canvas. Historians still argue whether the scorching here stems from a lantern's flare brushing too close, or from a flash of spectral heat, an energy discharge with no recognizable source. You rise and shine your lantern into the tent's far corner, where a collapsed cot lies half-frozen. Its metal frame is rimed with crystalline frost, shimmering where moonlight filters through the canvas. You lift the thin blanket and find a depression where someone, or something, must have slept. The imprint is frosted solid, as though the sleeper's body chilled the mattress into ice. Fringe enthusiasts call this the frozen throne, believing it to be the seat of the phantom when it visits this camp. You kneel and press your hand against the icy fibers, the cold bites through your glove, sending a shock of pain across your palm. From beneath a tangle of tent poles, you extract a leather-bound notebook, its cover studded with frost beads. This is the hermit's log you spotted near Clara Jenkins's lantern shrine in Section 6, but here it's been relocated into the forbidding chill of the tent's interior. You flip toward the last entry, scrawled in ink now blurred by moisture. It reads, "The air turned to frost, and I felt my warmth stolen." A second line is crimson-stained, the color faded but unmistakable. You hesitate, recalling forensic ink analysis methods first popularized in the 1970s to date document forgeries, techniques that could confirm if this entry predates the room's frost or followed it. Historians still argue whether that cloak of frost precipitated physical injury or existed only in the writer's fraying mind. Your lantern light dances across the ground where frost abruptly cedes to bare dirt. Beneath a scorch arc embedded in the soil you discover a small, twisted fragment of metal, a piece of what looks like a lantern wick holder, deformed by heat yet coated in frost wherever it touches the ground. You pick it up, the metal is cold to the core, frost clinging to its edges. In 1897, forensic pathologists began using chemical cold tests to detect bodily fluids at crime scenes, applying reagents that froze upon contact. Here, the metal seems to reverse engineer that logic, cold radiating outward instead of inward. Fringe chemists hypothesize the phantom's presence alters molecular vibrations, forcing matter to drop in temperature around it. Historians still argue whether such experiments hold scientific weight or if they simply chase shadows of old ghost stories. Your gaze lifts to the tent's entrance, where scorch patterns outline a perfect semicircle. It's as if someone held a lantern in place, carving the canvas with its flame. You remember the thermos from Section 10 that inexplicably refilled itself overnight, and the pocket watch from Section 4 whose hands froze at 3:17. Could these scorch marks correspond to the moment the watch stopped, or the thermos warmed itself? You crouch by the tent's threshold and press a fingertip to the scorched line, the canvas yields with a brittle crackle. Beneath, the underlying fabric is intact, unburned, suggesting someone or something applied precise heat to the surface only. You stand and circle the tent, inspecting frost patches that radiate outward from each scorch mark, like ice forming around a hot ember. It's a paradox you can't reconcile, ice at the hearth, heat at the edges. Scholars still debate whether these cold scald phenomena are caused by rapid thermal expansion and contraction in humid air or if they're captured energy from a paranormal flash. You shine your lantern back inside, revealing a last, startling detail. Near the center lies a single boot print, half fossilized in frost and half smudged onto bare dirt, as though the foot moved through two realms at once. The tread matches your own boots, but reversed, as if someone walked backward, toward you. A hush presses in, thicker than any wind. You recall the lament in Lisa Carter's journal, the air hums with something alive from Section 3, and the muffled chuckle captured on your recorder in Section 5. All these threads converge here, frost, fire, and ghostly laughter entwined in this tent's confines. You breathe deep, tasting metal and pine, and feel a surge of vertigo, a sense that the tent itself is a chamber of shrines, an altar to the phantom's dual nature. Protective zeal and destructive hunger merge in this microcosm, leaving you to wonder if you'll leave with all your warmth intact. Your heart hammers as you step back outside, frost cracking beneath your boots, and you realize you've crossed an invisible threshold. Inside, the tent held secrets of heat and cold beyond any manual or field guide. You secure the metal fragment and notebook in your pack, careful not to disturb the frost prints further. The night air wraps around you, strangely warm in contrast to the tent's chill. You glance back, the canvas hangs silent, scorched lines dark against frost-white patterns. This forsaken shelter has raised more questions than answers, its frost and scorch carving a riddle you cannot yet solve. As you depart, you run your gloved finger over the frost left on the tent pole, like a phantasmal handshake. The forest seems to exhale, in that breath, you swear the frost glitters once more, as if bidding you to return and finish the unspoken investigation. You pocket your thermometer, tug your parka tighter, and step onto the path where footprints lead onward, toward Section 12's eerie teenage dare that awaits. You tread a narrow path toward the old clearing where the appendages of gnarled oaks form a natural cathedral, their branches arching like watchful sentinels. It's dusk, and the last amber light filters through the leaves, casting dancing shadows that coil around your boots. Tonight, a group of local teens has gathered here on a dare, to summon the phantom in Selma Woods. In 1982, the Missing Children Act established a federal database for missing minors, reflecting rising concerns about teenage disappearances, so there's a real weight behind this reckless thrill. As you step into the clearing, you find 4 flashlights arranged in a loose circle atop a mossy stump. Each beam quivers in the gathering gloom, illuminating spirals carved into the wood, echoes of the Lupin cross motifs you traced back in Section 1's Fallen Cedar and Section 3's Mine Tunnel. The teens, faces pale with excitement and nerves, huddle close. You recognize Avery's shaky breath. Her compass, the same model Lisa Carter carried, sits open on a rock, its needle spinning as though caught in one of those unseen currents you encountered in Section 3. They begin chanting in low voices, "Phantom. Phantom. Phantom." Each repetition grows more urgent, more desperate, until the hush of the forest presses in around them. Fringe lore claims that when you call the phantom's name thrice, it will whisper your darkest secret in return. You lean in, heart thrumming, as a faint sugar tang of caramel apples drifts through the trees, recalling Section 1's odd sweet scent that seemed so out of place among pine and earth. Avery holds her recorder in trembling hands. She presses record and asks, "We dare you, show us yourself." The forest answers with a sudden rush of wind that rattles the rope coils hanging from nearby branches, those same coils you saw the 1962 searchers braiding with pine needles in Section 4. Each coil taps the bark in a staccato rhythm, like a muted Morse code spelling out a challenge, "Stay back." You step closer, whispering, "Listen for the calliope." In Section 5, you captured its warped melody floating through the night. Now, a distant tinkle drifts in, faint and off-key, as though a phantom carnival train creaks just beyond hearing. The teens freeze, flashlights blinking wildly as the melody warps into something darker, more insistent. The keyhole carving you spotted on that birch in Section 4 seems to glow in the flashlight beams, its edges catching stray light like a silent invitation. "Did you hear that?" Avery gasps. You nod, noticing how the air has chilled. The ground beneath your feet feels unnaturally firm, lacking the soft give you felt on the frozen palm print in Section 11's tent. As you glance down, you see shallow indentations forming before your eyes, footprints that hover just above the soil before fading into nothing, the same levitating tracks from Section 2 and Section 7. A shiver runs up your spine. One of the teens, Jordan, flicks his flashlight across the clearing. His beam lands on a half-buried pocket watch near the stump, the one frozen at 3:17 you tucked away after Section 4. It ticks once in the dusky light, then stops. A collective gasp rises as Jordan stoops to pick it up, breath visible in the sudden frost that gathers at the watch's edges. "Get back!" Someone hisses, recalling the rattled nerves you heard in Section 9 when those 2 glowing eyes flickered atop the log. But it's too late. Jordan presses the watch to his ear, and the forest seems to inhale around him. You watch in horrified fascination as his eyes go wide, voice clipping to a whisper, "I hear her." Before he can say more, a snap echoes to your right. Flashlights sweep the undergrowth and catch nothing but shadows twisting among the trunks. Avery's recorder crackles, and you hear a low murmur, "Jewer, Dan, come back hack." The pitch wavers unnaturally, sounding both childish and feral, as though the phantom borrows voices from lost souls. "Let's go," another teen stammers, voice cracking. They spin toward the path, but Jordan is gone. His flashlight lies abandoned by the stump, beam half-lit and swinging like a wounded moth. You rush forward, heart hammering, but the ground where he stood is blanketed by leaf litter. Only a single spiral, freshly carved, glares at you from the stump's edge. Avery collapses to her knees, eyes brimming. You kneel beside her, pressing a hand to her shoulder. "He can't be far," you whisper, though the icy tremor in your gut says otherwise. You flip on your own light and sweep the clearing. The tense frosted handprint from Section 11 springs to mind, but here the frost is gone, just the crisp air that carries a faint odor of ozone and scorched canvas, as if the scorched tent from Section 11 exhaled all at once. In your pocket, the recorder from Section 5 pulses with static. You pull it out and hit play. Overlapping whispers swirl, Lisa. Jordan, help. The voices overlap like pieces of a broken lullaby, a chorus of missing hikers crying out in unison. Your throat tightens as you recall the Boy Scouts lullaby in Section 2, this feels like its dark echo, warning you that curiosity can be deadly. You rise, scanning tree trunks for clues. On one birch, you spot small nails hammered in a cluster, echoing the ones you traced back in Section 8. Beneath them, someone carved a series of tiny crosses and spirals, an urgent map pointing toward the northeast. Maybe it wants us to follow, you murmur. Historians still argue whether these carvings serve as warnings to stay away or trails to follow for rescue. Avery scrambles to her feet, shoulders quivering. She shines her light northeast, where the forest opens onto a slope strewn with lichen-coated boulders, the high-interest zone from Section 4's search. You lead the way, stepping over a coil of rope that twitches as if alive. The frost in the air prickles at your cheeks, recalling the icy palm imprint you touched inside the tent. As you move, the chorus of whispers rises again, buzzed through the trees, find the way. You pause at the base of a fallen cedar, its exposed root ball bearing fresh scratch marks, claw-like gouges similar to the spiral in Lisa's tunnel from Section 3. A chill courses through you. The Team Dare has turned into a rescue mission you didn't ask for. You glance at your watch, 3:17. The same time the pocket watch froze. A realization dawns, this moment, this hour, must hold power in the phantom cycle. You feel the wind shift, carrying the faint caramel apple scent, now sour with fear. The calliope tune warbles faintly here, as though the carnival has come to a final performance. You kneel at the root ball, pressing your palm to the scratch gouges. Your glove warms against something pulsing beneath the wood, an energy you felt in every carved spiral and scarred tent canvas. It's here, you whisper. The forest exhales, and for a heartbeat you think you see a silhouette woven from mist and moonlight drift behind you. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream rips through the clearing. The teens freeze, faces drained. You whip around, but only moonlit branches sway. The scream echoes again, distant yet urgent, calling Jordan's name. You feel your blood run cold and stand, lantern raised. We have to find him now, you say, voice steady despite the quiver inside. They nod, rallying around you. Flashlights converge on the slope ahead, where half-buried rocks form a crude spiral pattern, another energy sigil, as fringe devotees called the spiral carvings, now scored deep into the earth. The pattern points uphill, and you lead the way, each step a drumbeat in your chest. As you ascend, footprints appear in the soft silt, your own, the teens, and faintly, one set that hovers a hair's breadth above the ground before sinking. They lead toward a battered camping stool half buried in ferns, the one you righted in Section 10, now overturned again. On its seat lies Jordan's phone, screen cracked and displaying a single word scrawled on a cracked virtual page, follow. You scoop up the phone, heart thundering, and press locate. A ping echoes through the forest, just beyond the next rise. You shine your lantern up the hill and see a figure slumped at the crest, Jordan, cradled in the phantom's vigil or ensnared by it. You steady your breath and step forward, each carved spiral along the trail glowing faintly in the moonlight. Tonight's dare has become something far darker, a desperate bid to reclaim a missing friend from the wood's hungry shadows. You emerge onto the crest just as the first raindrops drum against your jacket, each one a soft pistol shot in the gathering darkness. Overhead, thunder rolls like a freight train bearing down on you, and the forest canopy shudders in response. In 1984, the Los Angeles Police Department established the first dedicated cold case squad, transforming decades-old mysteries into solvable investigations through renewed evidence review, and tonight, you feel the weight of every unresolved question pressing in on you. The slope beneath your boots slopes away in shadow, slick with rain, and the spiral patterns you followed up here now register as dark, wet scars on the earth. Lightning splits the sky, illuminating a pale figure standing at the lip of a collapsed stone outcropping, a silhouette draped in sodden fabric that clings like wet moss. Your heart skips a beat as you realize you're face to face with the phantom. You raise your lantern, its beam slicing through the rain. For a heartbeat, you see nothing but shifting gray shapes. Then two glowing eyes flare into view, turquoise-rimmed orbs that reflect rain like liquid glass. Fringe folklore claims that on stormy nights the phantom's eyes become conduits for lightning, snapping electric arcs toward those who dare hold its gaze. You shiver, recalling the infrared footage from Section 9 where the eyes shimmer green, and wonder if this downpour will amplify the entity's luminance or drown it in water. The figure steps forward, each movement measured, the soaked folds of its cloak whispering against carved lupin cross motifs in the wet undergrowth, marks identical to those scrawled on the fallen cedar in Section 1 and the mine wall in Section 3. The scent of rain-darkened pine mixes with that faint, uncanny sweetness of caramel apples you first noted seconds after entering the woods in Section 1, a paradoxical perfume that defies simple explanation. Historians still argue whether that sugar tang is a trick of wind-carried forest blooms or an intentional lure left behind by the phantom itself. You swallow hard, blood pumping in your ears. Lightning flashes again, and for a fleeting instant you see not a ghost, but a hunched figure wearing what looks like the tattered remains of a Civil War-era gray uniform, straps saturated with rain, brass buttons dulled by time. Fringe accounts hold that Confederate deserters who vanished here bound their rancor to the land, their guilt shaping the phantom's form in moments of high voltage. Scholars continue to debate whether these uniform sightings stem from genuine soldier folklore or later embellishments by thrill-seekers romanticizing war's specters. The phantom's voice, when it comes, is a low rasp that carries over the patter of rain, "You shouldn't have come." The words vibrate in your chest like a bass drum. You answer in a whisper that surprisingly doesn't tremble, "I need Jordan back." A gust of wind roars through the saplings, bending their trunks until they groan. You feel the tension of the forest, an audience awaiting the next act. Thunder crashes overhead, and the phantom raises an arm, pointing toward a jagged fissure in the rock, one you recognize from Section 5's EVP Hollow, where stones once rattled in greeting. The fissure glows faintly, as though lined with phosphorescent moss. You step closer, lantern beam trembling, and see a series of shallow grooves carved into the stone, tiny keyhole shapes mirroring the birch marking from Section 4, now stacked in a ring like a guardian seal. "Follow," the phantom hisses, voice swallowed by rain. Behind you, the teen's flashlights bob uncertainly, beams bouncing off tree trunks slick with moisture. Avery's face is pale, eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. You tuck your recorder into your pocket, capturing every drop of rain and crackle of thunder is no longer your priority, now it's Jordan's safety. You advance toward the fissure, water pooling at your ankles, each step splashing like spilled blood on the rock. The phantom glides forward too, cloak trailing in a shallow rivulet. Occasionally, static sparks crack at its fingertips, as if the air itself carries electrical charge. Fringe technicians once claimed that paranormal presences can ionize surrounding gas molecules, producing telltale ozone smells and tiny sparks, but mainstream atmospheric scientists dismiss such readings as sensor anomalies in storm conditions. Historians still argue whether those early 20th century EVP enthusiasts misread geophysical phenomena for ghostly proof. A bolt of lightning arcs across the sky, illuminating Jordan's silhouette beyond the stone ring. He's seated on a damp boulder, head bowed, shoulders shivering. You hurry forward, but the phantom intercepts you, stepping between you and your friend in a single, silent motion. You freeze, breath fogging in the lantern light. Rain drums heavy on your hat brim, and the scent of ozone crackles in the air. Your hand sweeps toward the pocket watch in your coat, its hand still frozen at 3:17, small droplets clinging to its cracked face. You hold it aloft, letting the rain sluice off the glass. The phantom's eyes lock on the watch, pupils narrowing. Anxiety coils in your stomach as you recall Section 12's warning, that watch seemed to bind the phantom's attention. You whisper, "This brought me here. It can save me." For a moment, time itself seems to stall. Thunder recedes to a distant mutter. The phantom inclines its head, cloak parting to reveal a chest plate etched with faded initials, RT, perhaps, matching your cold case deserter theory from Section 8. A swirl of mud and leaf litter eddies around its feet, as if the earth rejects contact. You exhale slowly, voice calm despite the storm, release him. A deafening crack of thunder splits the sky, lightning illuminating the fisher's glowing mouth. In that flash, you glimpse a mass of indistinct shapes beyond, wet limbs, fragmented laughter, blinking eyes. Jordan's voice calls out, distant yet familiar, I'm here. The phantom's form flickers, cloak rippling like storm-tossed canvas. Water cascades from its hood, revealing a face half-carved in shadow, features both human and impossible. The phantom's rasp echoes in your skull, he belongs to me now. Rain mists your vision as you step forward, pressing the watch toward the fisher. At that moment, you recall mainstream detective lore. In 1935, criminologist Hans Gross argued that objects can hold psychic residue of violent events, influencing witnesses, an early theory of forensic psychology. If the watch carries Carter's final terror, perhaps it binds the phantom's power. With a surge of resolve, you fling the watch into the fisher's maw. It skitters across damp stone, bouncing once before vanishing into darkness. You hear its echoing ping, swallowed by an unseen chasm. The phantom's scream reverberates through the trees, a sound like metal tearing. You stagger back, rain blurring your sight. Then silence, a void so complete it feels like the forest itself has been drained of sound. The fisher's glow fades, leaving only slick black rock. Jordan staggers forward from the shadows, eyes wide, drenched but breathing. He collapses against you, trembling. Behind him, the phantom has receded into shadow, its form dissolving like mist under floodlight. You catch one last glimpse, the Lupin cross sigil carved atop its shoulder, burning bright for a heartbeat before the rain washes it away. Thunder rumbles far off, a closing refrain. Avery rushes to Jordan's side, checking him for signs of cold or shock. You wipe rain from your face, tasting salt and relief. The phantom's departure leaves no footprints, no scorched canvas, no frost, only the mossy outcrop and carved keyholes you passed. Yet the air still hums with electricity, and you swear you feel a tether slip free from your chest. As you guide the teens downhill toward safety, Jordan leans into your shoulder, voice husky, you saved me. You offer a wry, breathless grin, we'll call it an evening. Rain continues to pelt the forest, but it feels less hostile now, the whisk of water like a lullaby after thunder's roar. Behind you, the fisher sits empty, its secrets reclaimed by darkness. The forest exhales, branches dripping, and you realize that tonight's storm has washed away more than rain. The phantom's shape may reappear with the next tempest, but Jordan is safe, and the watch lies silent within the earth. As you follow the winding path back, each step echoes with battered hope, a battered artifact of confrontation on a stormy night you won't soon forget. You stand in the damp clearing, lantern droplet shaking in your grip as you survey the twisted spiral scored into the rattling chain links and the frost-fused scorch rings from Section 11's tent. All around you, the woods seem to hold their breath, awaiting your verdict on what you've witnessed. In 1906, the seminal text Criminal Investigation by Hans Gross codified the scientific methods that transformed amateur ghost hunting into the rigorous discipline of criminalistics, a mainstream leap that placed skepticism on formal footing even as folklore persisted. Tonight, you ponder whether the phantom in Selma Woods belongs in a dusty case file or in the realm of the uncanny. On one side, you replay every sensory fragment, the sudden chill of the icy palm, the warped carnival tune echoing like a siren call in Section 5, and the flash of turquoise eyes in Section 13 that glowed with storm-charged vitality. Fringe enthusiasts claim the phantom is a psychokinetic imprint left by a tormented soul, a so-called stone tape phenomenon where emotions record themselves into wood and stone. You remember Clara Jenkins's guardian lantern from Section 6, which some locals swear brightens at midnight to guide wanderers, an argument that toes the line between protective spirit and trapped apparition. Historians still argue whether such residual hauntings are genuine records of emotional trauma or simply tricked-out interpretations of natural phenomena. Yet on the opposite bank of belief, you catalog every forensic touchstone, the uniform-like ragged cloak glimpsed in Section 13 that resembled Civil War deserter garb, the floating footprints of Section 7 that forensic experts in 1975 deemed impossible on any known gate, and the thermal equilibrium of the Polaroid prints in Section 7 that registered no temperature variance, hinting at staged hoaxes. You think back to Section 2's tampering theory, skeptics who traced the infrared eyes to concealed LEDs, and mainstream TV's exposé on calliope sound playbacks that could mimic phantom melodies. Historians still argue whether early paranormal investigators knowingly blurred lines to fuel sensationalism or earn railroad-worthy headlines. You take a deliberate breath, tasting pine resin, metallic frost, and a faint swirl of tobacco from Section 2's Turner encounter. You feel the tug of psychology, the power of suggestion as teens in Section 12 called out the phantom's name, summoning trembling rope taps that sounded like Morse code warnings. Psychiatrists since 1888 have documented mass hysteria cases where group expectations conjure shared hallucinations, one of the earliest recognized being the so-called dancing plague of 1518, when townsfolk believed they saw each other dance uncontrollably. Could the phantom be no more than a forest-wide delusion, fueled by centuries of rumors and carved spirals handed down like a haunted heirloom? Historians still argue whether these mass experiences reveal collective unconscious or are simply crowd-driven tall tales. You shift your weight, noting how the ground beneath your boots feels both solid and tremulous, as if the forest itself is deciding where you stand. A gust of wind rattles the chains overhead, resonating like distant prison bars. Fringe theory contends that the phantom feeds on emotional energy, drawing strength from fear and dissipating when confronted by rational analysis. Above you, moonlight filters through skeletal branches, spotlighting a spiral pattern on the forest floor, an energy sigil you first glimpsed in Section 4's rescue circle. You lean in, fingertips brushing the pattern's carved edges, feeling the grain vibrate against your glove. And yet, you cannot dismiss the empirical oddities, the frost handprint that defied due behavior in Section 11's tent, the scorching scorch marks that left canvas half-burnt without fuel residue, and the pocket watch of Section 13 whose hands froze at precisely 3:17 every time it neared the phantom's presence. You recall mainstream investigative protocols. In 1980, behavioral profiling emerged as a strategic tool in FBI cold cases, applying psychological theories to tangible evidence. If the phantom is a human, or something augmented by human cunning, you'd expect fingerprints, footprints, or technological footprints. But the sheriff's files remain curiously thin, as though someone, something, expunged every trace. You swallow, forcing your pulse back into your chest. The forest hums with tension, alive to your indecision. You review the catalog of clues like entries in a ledger, spirals, keyholes, calliope notes, floating tracks, frost, scorch, glowing eyes, metallic whispers. Each item tilts the balance, pointing alternately to a spectral entity sprung from communal lore and to a brilliant, elaborate ruse crafted by minds both mischievous and desperate. Historians still argue whether these artifacts are better explained by late Victorian spiritualism run amok or by a serial prankster wielding century-old carnival relics. You recall Lisa Carter's journal plea from Section 3, "Help me," etched into stone in a frantic hand. Was that a dying call from a genuine victim, or a posthumous echo engineered by someone who knew where the symbols would lure seekers? The cave-in theory of 1910 seems irrelevant now, yet the mine tunnel remains open, inviting endless speculation. You feel the narrative tug, an unfinished ledger of loss, or a labyrinth of planted breadcrumbs leading only to more questions. As you weigh both sides, you sense the phantom watching from the periphery, a presence that may delight in murky ambiguity. In the annals of true crime, few mysteries remain so elegantly unresolved, and perhaps that is its greatest power. You realize the real debate isn't solely about ghosts or trickery, it's about why we tell these stories, and what we choose to believe when faced with the unexplainable. Historians still argue whether the legend's persistence springs from genuine encounters or from humanity's hunger for a myth that can never be fully laid to rest. You step back, lantern raised, and let your lantern's glow wash over the clearing one last time. The spirals on the ground, the charred tent fragments, and the fingerprints of frost all lie between fact and fable. Your heart thumps not with fear but with the exhilaration of standing at the crossroads of history and mystery. The phantom in Selma Woods, whether born of psychic imprint or clever artifice, has woven itself into the forest's DNA, and into your own. You take a final deep breath, inhaling the scent of pine, ozone, and lingering caramel sweets. You feel anchored by your own observation, yet drawn forward by the forest's silent insistence that the story isn't over. You step away from the spiral ring and into the dark path ahead, accepting that the debate will outlive any single witness. After all, the line between what can be proven and what must be believed is as thin and delicate as the frost on the 10th floor, a boundary the phantom crosses at will. You emerge from the thicket onto the forest road just as dawn's first pale fingers brush the pines. Every step crunches on the pine needle carpet, louder than you remember, as if Selma Woods itself is holding its breath one last time. In 1967, the U.S. National Crime Information Center created the first national missing persons database, a milestone that transformed how vanishings like Lisa Carter's were recorded, yet here, the county sheriff's files still bear only half-whispered reports and empty pages. Historians still argue whether that bureaucratic expansion ever reached rural precincts like yours, or if the Woods' reputation simply discouraged formal inquiries. You pause by the old mile marker, its metal digits peeling, and feel the residual hum of every circle of carved spirals you passed since Section 1's fallen cedar. Locals now call this stretch the Silent Mile, claiming no birds sing here and even cicadas fall mute. Fringe enthusiasts insist the silence is a protective barrier the phantom erects to guard its domain, a sonic moat around the deep-rooted mystery. You swallow, tasting morning mist and the faint sugar lilt of caramel apples lingering on the breeze, as though the forest refuses to let go of its most elusive signature. The town lies a mile down the road, snug between rolling hills and whispering creeks. You recall the stickered windows of the general store, where a faded notice warned "Do not enter Selma Woods after dark." That sign went up in 1979, after the notorious disappearance of 3 Boy Scouts on a dare, an event that provoked statewide headlines and spurred villagers to paste warnings on every fence post. Historians still argue whether the sign deterred would-be thrill-seekers or simply stoked the legend further, turning a rural tragedy into a Halloween spectacle. As you approach the first cluster of weather-beaten cottages, you notice the shuttered windows and the hush, even at this hour. Rumors swirl here like autumn leaves. Some say that on moonless nights you can still hear a child's lullaby drifting from the tree line, while others claim that clock towers in Selma's square skip forward at precisely 3:17, the moment Lisa's watch froze and the phantom's power peaked. You might dismiss such tales, but each glance toward the woods prickles your skin with lingering unease. You stop at Old Miller's Tavern, where patrons once swapped ghost stories over warming toddies. Now the sign swings silent, boards nailed across its entrance. Locals tell of phantom laughter drifting through its darkened halls, as if the carousel phantom still tours its empty booths. Fringe bloggers maintain that secret midnight gatherings sometimes occur in the ash-strewn courtyard, with hooded figures carving fresh spirals into cellar doors. Historians still argue whether those rumors reflect underground societies preserving folklore, or organized pranks by urban explorers chasing viral infamy. You continue past the boarded-up schoolhouse, its playground rusted and silent. Children used to dare each other to run to the edge of the woods and back, swearing they felt a breath at their necks or saw glowing eyes between the saplings. In 1994, an academic study of childhood fear documented Selma Woods as a case study in learned terror, how communal lore can heighten a child's sense of the uncanny. Yet residents still squabble over whether that study helped protect kids by raising awareness, or if it seeded new nightmares in impressionable minds. You round the bend onto Main Street, where a single lamppost stands flickering, too unreliable to trust, yet never replaced. You lean in, feeling the hum of its neon green glow, and wonder if the phantom's energy tingles through municipal wiring. Fringe theories have linked that lampposts flicker to electromagnetic anomalies recorded at the forest's edge. Skeptics chalk it up to decades-old ballast and frayed wiring. Historians still argue whether the lampost's unreliable glow truly reflects paranormal influence, or simply decades of deferred maintenance. Finally, you reach your car, its engine cold beneath a dusting of needles. You place your recorder on the hood and press play. Layered whispers surge. You came back. A wave of relief and dread washes through you. You tuck the recorder inside, slide into the driver's seat, and close your eyes for a heartbeat. Outside, Selma Woods stands silent and inscrutable, its secrets folded back into the mist. The engine turns over with a reluctant roar. As you pull away, you glance in the rearview mirror at the tree leaf tips aglow in sunrise. The woods look peaceful, almost benign, yet you feel their gaze tracking your every mile. You clutch the wheel, pulse still echoing those invisible footsteps. The road ahead feels safe, but you know the silence will speak again tonight, and the town will whisper warnings to any who listen. Now the forest's voice softens, the final echoes of footsteps fading into a gentle hush. You breathe deeply, letting each exhale carry away the tension that thickened your chest. The air around you feels lighter, warmed by the sun's first rays seeping through hazy clouds. Your heartbeat slows, the rasp of your breath smoothing into a steady rhythm. Feel the weight lift from your shoulders as the mist recedes, leaving only dew-kissed grass in its wake. As you reflect on every carved spiral and half-heard whisper, know that unanswered questions can be soothing in their own way, cradling your imagination rather than haunting it. The details, the frozen watch hands, the flickering eyes, the looping sigils, will settle into memory like old lullabies, comforting you in twilight hours. Let the scent of pine and distant ozone remind you that mystery needn't be met with fear, but with gentle curiosity. Allow your senses to return to the present, the warmth of the sun on your face, the quiet chirp of morning birds, the rustle of wind through high grass. Each sound a reassurance that the world extends beyond shadowed branches, offering light and calm. Picture the mist lifting from the forest floor, drifting away to reveal soft green ferns and welcoming pathways. Now, carry this calm with you. Should the woods whisper in your dreams, welcome their stories as fading echoes rather than threats. Let your mind drift on that final breeze, where mystery becomes melody and silence feels serene. Rest easy, knowing the phantom in Selma Woods holds only the power you give it, and tonight, you choose peace. Sweet dreams. Sweet dreams.